Alright, this one's pretty. Ooh, let me just turn down that boost gain. Alright, this one's something I already talked about. Oh wow, I could mumble. Give me a second. And, well, the boost gain finally changed if I stop the recording and then resume it. So there's that. Alright. These are solves for Undersquare internal combustion engine cylinders, which I've already talked about at length at various stages throughout my YouTube channel. But the basic premise is pretty much consistently always the same. The way that you run a given type of undersquare needs to change. You either go with the air and fuel combo injector, which is effectively intake valve, which can now be very, very large, right? And that means that you can place in larger amounts of air and fuel at higher velocities at higher RPM. Okay? And that means it can also be actively pumped in to have pressure and velocities much higher and great fuel atomization, like 8-port indirect injection as it's happening. And you can always place in, as it's intaking, lower amounts of air or higher amounts of air, depending on how you want it to fit, and have either the heat from a previous combustion ultimately resultively vaporize the gas and doesn't have enough air for it to burn, which is great, which is what I've talked about at length before. If you ultimately know that you have a injector like that, that means you can have something spin and help pump actively more air and fuel in, like a mechanical injector and mechanical supercharger. All right, pretty simple stuff. Which means essentially you have an active system. All right, that's all it would really be. If you have an active system, you don't have to really worry.
I'll be back.
You can dynamically change it and get a different air and fuel, duration, timing, and more, and not have to worry. Right? Now, that doesn't explain exhaust, but exhaust is active unless you're doing a two-stroke, which is a scavenge kind of deal. All right, so two-stroke turns into, well, once it gets to a certain pressure at a given point, and it's from bottom dead or top dead point, then you're able to ultimately have a lower given pressure inside of the cylinder, which then you can actively place in more pressure from your injector, making a two-stroke scavenge far easier. Pretty simple stuff. It's not hard to do it. Now, if you want to get around that, then you use a different type of valving system altogether. You use the same one for the same thing. It's one giant, enormous, huge valve. One, literally one. That's right, one. All it has to do is rotate. Rotates, it's intake. Rotates a little bit more, now it's exhaust. You know what that means? It connected over here to the exhaust, connects over here to the intake. Simple shit, just do that. Now they're separated, works just fine. It's closed when it needs to be closed, it's open when it needs to be open. That's distancing in a given circle, that's rotating. Simple stuff, just do that. This one I haven't talked about at length, mostly because it's like, well, I've talked about rotating valves, and I assume that you already kind of knew how to do this. Like many times, I've already talked consistently about many rotating valve designs. Many times, truthfully. So, it's like, well, this is pretty simple. If your head's able to have a rotating assembly that's in it, then that's your camshaft and timing effectively also taken care of. You can have a secondary plate that happens to add in a greater oval-esque design, and what do you know? You've got more duration, and that bottom plate can now work to try and catch up to the top plate. Now the oval goes back to being more circular, and now you have duration. You had a larger valve, kind of technically, not really, you just had more duration, which is fine because truthfully the entirety of the intake stroke top is uncovered. There is no way to get a larger valve, dummy-dums. Deal with it, you idiots. Unless you've figured out some complex fucking fourth dimensional freaking space inside of a given more space dimensional aspect to this fucking shit, you're gonna shut the fuck up and realize like that's the distance, that's the size you can get. You can shut the fuck up and just deal with it. That's what you gotta do. Shut the fuck up and deal with it. Because that's all you can do. Give me a fourth dimensional breaking, third dimensional breaking, something like that, and we'll talk. Otherwise, shut the fuck up. Now, for me, it turns into, oh yeah, no, that's my exhaust. That's all I need for my exhaust. One side is just going to be my injector, my single stroke injector technology, which is a rocket injector. Since this needs to rotate and there's a secondary plate, that means I can make the injector ultimately pump in from a donut toroidal style pump. As there is already air that's trying to come in, that means it can go up suddenly, already have something in the given cylinder that's there, volume, that's your plenum, your runner. Then you have the ability as it spins to continue intaking more in a forceful manner. As a result of there being gas there, which is great because you're going to need that, that means you have the ability not just to use a given type of gear or bearing set to help ultimately make the rotating valve rotate and the pump rotate as well to help with this. You also have the ability to make it such that the fuel lubricates the whole thing, warms up a little bit, and becomes able to be input at different velocities and pressures at volumes that make sense for you to set up given the size of orifice that you intend to use. Kind of like a two-stroke system. As it rotates up, what happens? Something has to move, right? Or is attached, okay? Well, instead of it ultimately exposing places for gas to come in, instead, what does it do? It lifts something up for air to go and enter into the cylinder. It can lift more and have greater amounts come in. It's also got little tiny orifices for the fuel to ultimately speaking come in like a diesel at high pressures, atomizing it. It also has the ability to dump more in with the fuel like a carburetor where it's coming in at the top, right? As it forcefully intakes more and more air, which is like, how does it do that? And it's like, what's lifting up? Do you think it's a smooth little parabolic spike of something? Or do you think it's more like a centripetal centrifugal style supercharger? As you can see from the outsides towards the center, of course, it's forcing more air in. Obviously, you'd want that, yes, but there's something up there at the top called, blades will probably be good enough. Intake it and then it'll suck it in and fire it in at higher velocities and higher pressures. Getting cooled off by, is that some fucking fuel? Is there some fuel around here? I think that's fuel. Meanwhile, they're just dumping a little bit of extra fuel that way because the thingy open. The valve open, the thingy. And the little orifice there at the bottom is only. I'm now open. I'm now here, open. There's enough distance between the top of the cylinder's piston head and the head. No interference issues here, baby. It's open now. Guess what happened? Fuel dumped in as it intaked. A vacuum occurs. It all depends on ultimately how you want to run it. Because if you have two plates there, that means you can ultimately have that occur such that you dump a little bit of air, you have the scavenge effect, and then what do you get? A little bit of extra fuel after that as it dumps in, as it's still ultimately pulling a bit of a vacuum, and then whoosh, flings itself everywhere. It goes, oh God, what's all this heat doing here? I have now been vaporized. Oh fuck. And then it's like, no, I'm not done yet. More fuel. What? Why? What? It's raining, it's pouring, all this misty bullshit everywhere. What is this about? Why are you here? Behold, the air cometh. Whoosh. It's coming in such high velocities and pressures. Yes. Oh, goodness gracious. It's nearing its bottom dead center, sir. Are we at proper adequate air fuel ratios? Hopefully. I don't have anything more to give you. We're closing. What? What did you just say? Bottom dead center achieved. Being compressified. Meanwhile, is it getting hotter in here? Is it just me? I feel like it could just be me. It's getting lordy little. Meanwhile, behold, the injector technology has cometh once more. I thought there were plates still here rotating. Yes. You know, I went a little bit too heavy in wrench. Guess what? That's right. More air. Of course. Because, well, it's already combusted. Might as well throw in some more air. Why not? Nothing says that the cylinder can't rotate. Nothing says that the top and that valve can't rotate. Nothing says that there's effectively a bunch of no ability having for stators somehow happening, right? So, you know what that means? My camshaft is actually a supercharger for my injector. I'd prefer... Shut up over there. Behold, more air go in. Why just air? Because why would I want, like, fuel? I already have more than enough fuel. Why would I want the extra fuel? It's already burning. Why would I want it? Huh? Behold, explosive decompression. Oh! Hi there. Yes, no, you're a physics major, aren't you? I love the chemists over here with the physics majors. That's right. The nitric oxides go bang bang boobity boom boom baby runes. Guess what? Is this carbon? Oh yeah, I would definitely love you over here. I'm oxygen. I want to swing and dance with you, baby, all damn day. It's two for you and one of me. Oh yeah, oh yeah. Behold, nitrogen. I shall be lonely with myself, but I love myself. I love myself. Oh my God, yes I do. Look at this. N2s are up. NOs are down. COs are way the fuck down. CO2s are up. I also continue to accelerate the piston because it has to travel faster, right? So it's like, if you didn't know, detonation velocities of a higher, longer stroke, meaning longer and higher velocity. Higher velocity, longer stroke, length, right? Undersquare, that's what we're talking about. Require that. They require higher and higher velocities and higher pressures to achieve greater and greater torque values. If you want to continue creating more and more torque, and eventually power at higher RPMs, which can be achieved, then you need more pressure, or seen and felt pressure. All right, just because intake at the top is coming in, right? And it's like, yeah, kind of, sort of. Okay, you know, it's kind of sort of, right? Like fuel, I don't want the fuel into where the donut and the fuel used to be, right? So it's like, oh, the valve at the top, I don't want that. I don't want that anywhere near me. I don't want anything like that anywhere near. In fact, I want that all completely gone. That's the fuel amount that I got, and I want it all out. That is the reservoir. That's a fuel reservoir. I want it gone. I want it out. I want it gone, out, not there anymore, right? Well, of course, as pressure comes in, it'll try and force a little bit of fuel. Yeah, a little bit of it will combust, but most of it's going to combust down below. And as it goes in, it's like, right, but it's still rotating, and I'm still going to try and keep in taking air. As that pressure starts to build up, of course, we don't want that. We don't want that to blow anything at all up, right? Right, so it suddenly rapidly spins. This is a bunch of step-up gears, effectively, because that forces that fuel to try and travel in towards where the cylinder is, right? That's a good thing. You don't want that, right? Now, things go from center out, centrifugal, right? Often, okay? There is nothing stating there is nothing in the center of that goddamn injector. It was a hollow, completely just empty. No, no, no. There's the cylinder that you didn't even wait. You don't even know what it is that I have right there. You can't see what's in my mind, right? So you already lost out. You implied to your brain that this is the only way it could be done. You were wrong. Deal with it. Turns out there's a stem there. You need that. It helps with the axle, it helps with the bearings, it helps with the rotation. Everything gets helped. You want something to travel up, it needs to be attached to something, right? Not just the outside, you want it to always be aligned, like they do with coffee hand grinders. Well, of course, you're going to want a stem there, you want an axle, right? Guess what? Lubrication of fuel is required, right? Well, it's a fluid bearing. Fluid bearings still work last time I checked. Well, now it's, I don't really want to rotate as much. Well, that's fine. Speed up. Get the fuck out. I don't want you in here. And also, more air. Way more air. I want way more air. I need a lot more air. Right? Do I? How much more air? How long of a duration do I have? The various RPMs, you can calculate that for piston speeds. If it's this undersquare and it's this long of a stroke, you know that it has to achieve at this RPM this relative acceleration, which now turns into detonation velocities. You now got why I talk about detonation. That's how fast that's moving. That's right. If you want it to not ultimately break on you, guess what? You have to ultimately start slow and then speed up to achieve those RPMs. You can't do it because it accelerates too damn fast, because it'll literally impact wrench driver something and snap it off. You can't do it. But if you start slow and then you accelerate, then you absolutely can achieve those velocities for an undersquare design. Just like, a pilot might be able to handle a 9G sudden acceleration, but you know what? I'm pretty sure they'll survive a lot more often if it's 3G and then they get up to 9G. And then they only need to sustain 9G for a brief little bit of time. Just like, I'll have like relatively higher, pressures, relatively, all that. And then I burn really hard, really fast. All right. Now, here's the kicker, of course. I don't want any air, like I talked about, coming in at all, in any way, okay, to the intake. Just because the top valve is there doesn't in any aspect or way mean I've achieved high enough pressures in that. But I didn't in any aspect or way say that the valve opening is the same diameter or size or even shape of the stators that must be there, making a Tesla valve design. Very easy to go one way, much harder to go another way. It also happens to shrink down the valve's nozzle size and increases the overall velocity and the achieved perceived pressure inside of the cylinder and how fast and how far it gets before it starts to burn, and how much force is imparted inside of the pressurized chamber of air movement, combusted gases, that will eventually come back, mix, and burn very efficiently, while also increasing pressures for nitric oxides consistently as thrust. I get thrust. Nitric oxides go down, carbon dioxides go up, higher heats are maintained, except to remove nitric oxides takes heat and pressure. I gain pressure, sure, but I also lost heat, which is fine. I don't want heat, I want pressure. Pressure is what gives you torque and power, not heat. Heat is related to pressure, sure, but not one and the same. I don't want heat. I gained pressure by increasing the volume of gases. I still maintained heat, but I gained density. More density, more pressure, higher velocity as it's a constant thrust onto the top of the cylinder head, piston head, not cylinder head, and I ultimately gained more power and torque, which is why I get consistently for longer strokes Undersquare stuff in my designs really ridiculously high RPM that people don't know how the fuck I usually get until they listen through the entire damn thing and they go, oh, that's how. Oh, that's how. Oh, okay. It's like, oh, so you didn't listen. You didn't want to listen, huh? No, they skipped around. Oh, well, there's your problem right there, isn't that? The case, seemingly. No, I listened entirely. No, you skipped around is what you just said. Why you went lie? Meanwhile, behold, the next new chapter of all the given types of rotating valves. It's a two-side valve. It's going to have a stuck in from the bottom with a central axle. The axle, of course, is the injector, right? With a little extra air that you can add in with the the axle and fuel, right? But also means that you can perform a little bit of spark to ground, of course, because you can still do that. You can run it with an electrode in the center, or however ultimately you want to do it, right? But for me, it goes, oh, intake on one side, exhaust on the other. As it rotates, of course, it has to do that. All right, and then during its moment of power stroke, or exhaust, or any of it, you can dynamically tailor it to perform that given function at those RPMs exactly like you choose, which then means that rotational movement at that RPM can change. You can hit CVT types of gears, which change it dynamically to still operate perfectly at those given RPMs. That's why I like rotation valves. That's why I like intake coming in. That's why I like exhaust going out. It's technically the same valve, but you know what? It's also kind of not, right? So it still works though, just like that. And it's still able to be cooled because, of course, fluid has to be in there for lubrication. As it presses up, it goes in, squeezes, makes sure that it doesn't ultimately escape. It can have vertical T, meaning it has a vertical column that's in a circular, right, pattern, and it just needs to be able to slip in around that, kind of like an O-ring. But you have an O-ring on the top that isn't really an O-ring, okay? All right, like that's the fluid bearing part, right? So it's like fluid will come in from the top, it'll go down because it's rotating from the inside out. That becomes an O-ring as it pressurizes itself. So it has to do that to be able to have any of that fluid escape. As it's during its power stroke, right? It then closes, and then of course that's its own type of gearing type of thing, which has a change in its distance, right? And so as it's closed. We don't want it really to rotate much, if at all, right? Then it's completely sealed. You don't have to worry. Now I have either one area for our exhaust or the entirety of the circle. Right? Now, for me, I have the cylinder for the engine block stick out a little bit. I do, often, like all the time, practically. It sticks out from the actual planed flat surface is what they go with. And I'm like, I don't like that. If I stick it out just a smidge, and then I have these little grooves cut in, then the head can then slot into that easily. And with a little bit of gasket material right there, that means that that valve has a very easy way of having fluid come in and go out, and now it also has an ability to handle much higher pressures, because the head becomes a structural part to that little gasket-ish outcropping area to the head. And it seals in, and that helps also with engine coolant and oil, as I can route it around and still take that heat from that lubricant away as a heat exchanger. It increases pressures, structural rigidity, outright, truthfully speaking, power I can produce, and the material is now stronger as a result, which is great. It's geometry physics. It's the little grooves you cut in creates a higher degree of strength and rigidity, along with that now also being a much higher functional part to the heads. Sure, okay, yeah, no, you have to yank a little bit harder to get them out. Fine, I don't care. Whatever, you know? But that's why I like Undersquare. Undersquare means I can accelerate it longer. Force is not just a lever, which I love driving for answers. This is what it came from, driving for answers. Oversquare or undersquare design. I love his stuff, because it's like, no, you're right, it's complicated. Like, what's your setup for your engine? What's your setup for your engine? It massively changes ultimately how you're going to receive and get power. If you want to have a higher chance of producing more RPM at a undersquare design, you need to learn how best to do it. Often in the past, they would use a gearing. That's right, they would use gearing specifically. I know that sounds weird, but what they would do is at these lower RPMs, they would effectively have an overdrive gear, and it would attach to flywheels, but also the crank. And so as they went down, they wanted it to more slowly travel downwards, but still be able to maintain a higher, RPM. And what that means is, like, they gave a longer duration of intake, right? They can only intake so much, right? It's fine if it's fast, right? Right, but it risks damaging, and it does damage the cylinder walls, the crank, and more. And so a way to get around it was, oh yeah, no, sure, it traveled that fast, I guess, on the upward stroke. And, like, technically speaking, didn't really spend that amount of time during its combustion phase, traveling down, right? Like, there's these little tricks that they would have, farmers specifically. In America, I know for a fact, because they wrote all about it, they actually made them, they used them for their crop dusters, their tractors, their tillers, and more. Farmers in America had this shit well before they ever had it in big colleges. They talked all about it. They never got into any of these science papers or any of these physics papers or any of these mechanical engineering papers. None of it. Never got anywhere. But you know what they did? They did it anyways, and they had these big old farms. Huge farms. And it's like, man, I managed to get all of this done in this amount of time. And it's like, given this amount of friction, given this amount of, efficiency at how fast you're able to do it, given this amount of power, distance, all that. Basic calculations, right? They go and seek out these motherfuckers. If you're bragging about it, what did you manage to do to make your engine ultimately make that power? Be able to sustain that power. Make it such that you have that torque. You could do that in that time. How? How the fuck did you do that? What do you know? Farmers had it before they ever got it made and known by these big wig, industrial, aristocratic names that you in your textbooks have, that you learn about. Mechanical engineers hate this one trick. Farmers did it first. and they did it functionally first. They had functional working machines that ran for hours and hours and days and days and weeks and years before they were ever designed and put out by these garbage capitalistic swine motherfuckers that spent hours and hours learning how best they can figure out how to steal the design, put it out, patent it, bribe the right patent clerk and more to get ahead and ultimately be seen as the one who did it first and who's the smartest and all the rest. It was farmers in America. There are many clear examples of the journals that they had, that they were doing, they wrote down dimensions more, well before it ever got out. There were so many of those that existed, still exist. Even examples for a planetary moon. So like a planet gear with a bunch of planetary gears, and then a moon gear for a bearing on a crankshaft. That would then be attached to the moon gear, that would then suddenly put it up. Take it from a bottom point to its own top dead center. And the reason why they did that is because it would slow it down at the bottom and it'd speed it up at the top. Or it'd slow it down at the top and then change its rapid change from its 12 o'clock to 6 o'clock, as it would more slowly do it and it'd more easily for the crankshaft work together for a more consistent power delivery until it got to exhaust. So it would be fine on the way down, but during exhaust it would suddenly go bang, whoosh, bang for one exhaust, right? It boom, rapidly push it up, right? And that was wonderful. They used it in the late 1800s, early 1900s. Then it was like wartime, folks. It's war, 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 W-A-R, war, 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 W-A-R, war. War, the 30s, war. You mean the war on tail? Before they ever had it in colleges, farmers were doing it well before you were ever even acknowledging it existed. Tesla stole from various farmers, too. There are a couple of examples of Einstein as well, although he's one of the better ones, for what it's worth. Most of the household names you have stole it from people that never had their name in the history books. You can trace where it came from. If they ever went to a farmer, if they ever went to any of these, places that ultimately needed it to be there, to be able to do what they needed to do, to be able to get the size of operation, to be profitable for themselves, or even done in the first place. And it's like, when did they have the time? And it's like, well, I'm tilling the land and I'm just going in a straight line. Doing fuck all and nothing. I wonder if I could do this. Yeah, I wonder if I'm gonna write that down. I wonder if I could do this. I wonder if I could do that. I wonder if I. And then it's like, well, I have an extra. I need to repair it anyways. I don't know anything about machining. Never done it. It's not like a common thing that most people knew back in the day. And ultimately, many different things they had to effectively repair and maintain. They had to make their own parts. Oh, it'd take 3 months for you to get this to me. Fuck that shit. 3 fucking months. Fuck off. I'm just gonna do it. I'm just gonna fucking make it myself. What's so hard? What's the material? Was it? And pay this guy like however much it was to fucking know with that particular steel, where they bought it from, this manufacturer, whatever it is, right? Next thing you know, they're making it themselves. That's right. Farmers knew. Farmers knew before the people that you say did it first. You say knew anything about it. You say in your textbooks often, and you preach and profess with your professornesses, learned, and they were the ones that did it. No, they just got to write the story. They got to write that they did this given type of paper or experiment or whatever. But in reality, it was done by farmers. It's often one done in America. I know a lot about the American ones just because America was the ones that did the majority of them. That ultimately that are still survived by journals and paper trails.
It's hot in here.
All right, so this one's brutal. All right, like farmers did it first, right? It's like this is what we're talking about, okay? All right, before the whole interruptions and more. But you'd be surprised at how that's why I talk about a lot of the stuff I say I did first. I talked about first. I know for a fact that there are ways of ultimately listening in and observing people that people often don't want any way to understand or know in terms of hacking, microphone use of your phone, your computer, or more. And shocker, a lot of the things I talk about are all directly related to people that have many, many, many different ways of doing that. Okay? And it's like, all right, so we're talking about Undersquare, right? It's like, right. Then it's like, well, here's a valve for regular intake and outtake, right? Of air. I mean, intake and exhaust. Sure, whatever. They're all the same words after a while. You know? It's like, the faster the velocity, the greater the degree of friction. Now, what do I talk about constantly putting on the insides of my cylinder walls and the outsides of my piston skirts? Diamond-like carbon and ceramic coatings that reduce friction. Correctamundo. Right? Now, it's like, all right, so they did this, and they had these designs for quite a while, and they still have some of them that exist. Still. It's not even a joke, they do. Yeah. It's a laundry day today. So, deal with that, I guess. I can't change the temperature. Dry level, very dry, of course. Alright. But it's like, alright. It's like, no, they wouldn't have done that. No, they can. And they did. It's known that they did it to themselves. What stops them from doing it to others? Why would you believe such a misguided idea and thought? Because your idols now suddenly aren't great? Your heroes suddenly don't look as good? Why? Why is that suddenly going to change the truth? Right? Right. It's like, alright, so the planetary gear, like, how does that work? I'm like, well, there are working examples, and I just told you. Like, seriously, there are genuinely working examples, and I just told you. But it's effectively a moon to planet Earth. So they take planet Earth its rotation, but it's not quite the moon we have now. Imagine at certain stages during the new moon, it rotated and it wasn't in lockstep anymore. Right? And like, that's all it really does. Right? That's all it's really doing. It gives a variable valve duration for the crankshaft. Instead of using the camshafts to variable valve durate, it uses the crankshaft. It's like, no, that can't be done. And I'm like, no, it's been done many times before, actually. If you don't know, well, I'll explain it pretty easily. Because a camshaft can be changed with its given gearing ratios and distance traveled around a central point in a circle. And so that's all a gear is. And so because the gear is bigger and or smaller, that means changes in velocity and time duration for that given experienced thing going on now changes. So because rotation of the given crankshaft and its perceived in no way but actually given in terms of time for gearing has increased or decreased at various stages, means you've gained a variable valve duration for the changes as where it is in its placement at top dead or bottom dead center. Some people didn't know that. Like, no, I'm a mechanical engineer. I'm a very old person. I'm in my 90s, 80s, 70s, whatever. I've never heard about this. And I'm like, yes, no, I know. You are part of the propaganda generation, the baby boomers. Americans do no wrong. My idols are these incredibly intelligent, amazing people. They're not. Most of them are not creative. Most of them did jack shit, and that's the truth. Like I'll tell you, the real, real sad actual truth, which is, it just does this chime. We'll just do manual dry. I do time dry of fucking 50 because that is not dry. Like I just put it in there, so like absolutely fuck you basically on that one. You know, as that decides to start draining liquid or putting liquid in there. Okay. Anyways, you just pause this real quick. Okay, so that given generation, right, is a thing. The duration for ultimately how to achieve for these undersquare designs, because this is what it's doing. It makes it smoother on the way down and on the way up, even if it sacrifices, briefly, a sudden increase or decrease in speed, piston speeds. At top dead center, on the way up, or bottom dead center, when it's going to total bottom dead center, right? But it's only on the one side, on the upward, so exhaust stroke. Right, so like it'll actually curve in towards bottom dead center on the moon gear already, and then like the rest of it, the actual planet gear, then fully curves into bottom dead, and then it'll suddenly pick up, right? Because that has to then transfer that to the moon gear. It's a whole thing, but effectively it's like the reason why they don't use it is because it was more complicated. It's high performance. This is high performance application now. You can only use it in the high performances. This is so expensive for us to manufacture. No, it's not. It's easy as fuck. What are you talking about? What is this? Why are you doing this? This makes no sense. Why would you fucking believe in any aspect or way that this would be difficult? Well, you know, I have to manufacture another gear, I have to blah 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 blah. It works for fucking hours on end. Weeks. I've used this for years already. Why wouldn't you sell it like that? It's high performance. You need to pay more. You need to pay thousands more. What? What? What the fuck? This is like less than a fucking couple of this is less than 5 cents to produce extra on this fucking engine at the time, right? And that means something, sure, but not that much, even for them. Do you see it? Capitalism ruins the day again. Capitalism strikes again, ruins it for everyone. They had it for a long time, but eventually things wear out. Eventually, the people that did it die. The passed down information disappears. They don't remember where the journal is. This and you know, it's a sore subject, and it's terrible to talk about. Like I hate. Why do you hate this guy? He's so good. He's a great engineer. He's doing my thing. That's mine. I am literally the one that made that. He's a great grandfather or grandfather, right? It's a sore subject, and of course, can lead to people not reacting or acting great during those moments, and you know, they need to put it away, and there's nothing you can do. There's no fucking going to, because they have the patent. There's no going to the public because they won't believe. There's no going to any news outlet because, of course, they're owned by the richer individuals, and it wouldn't matter because it would disappear eventually. It's like, they are the salty ones. And it's like everybody starts looking like the worst version of Thomas Edison. And Americans have a wonderful paper trail that's not circumstantial in the fucking slightest of this being a thing. Like, talked about the dimensions, talked about how it works, the mechanical, they had a working design, all this shit. Multiple witnesses, others. This person is coming down to see it. They talked about that. Oh my god, they wrote to the oh, those records, right? Like for the bigwig? No, No, they disappeared. They burned them. For them? Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no. Well before they ever came up with it. Well before it was sold. Well before any of it. And so it's like, right, that planetary gear for the crank. It's like, yeah, no, it's a planetary gear with a ring, like a slide. That's where its new version of slide is, right? For the bearings on the outside. Like that's where it exists, right? And it worked beautifully well. No, they can't cast. They can't machine. There's nothing. They know nothing. Really? There's no way. Oh, come on. Do you remember the war for the Spanish? Americans did. You remember that? Good old Teddy did that, right? Yeah, no, but then there's the 1800s. I mean, there's no wars around there. There's no, like, savages and none of this, none of that. People don't need to learn how to machine for very... Are you sure? There's no Confederacy versus the North, right? Us, America, right? You guys are idiots. You never remember that the things that you see now as to why it is someone or something suddenly has this information. Suddenly exists in everyday average people that went back to doing everyday average jobs. No, it couldn't, and why would they? You guys are fucking stupid. Your reputation precedes you every time. You never think past a certain point. You never see more than a bare surface level. You guys are idiots all the time, mostly because you make yourselves into idiots by doing what you're doing. You don't do work. You don't continue doing past that point of work. You have to see a little bit more than you think. It's obvious that they would have that. It's obvious that this is going on. Statistical analysis alone tells you, of course, it's a thing. There's no smart farmers ever. There's no creative farmers ever. They would have no incentive to learn this. They wouldn't even have the ability. All of the little tiny niggly wiggly questions are already answered. You didn't see it? You don't see why? You don't see the history? You don't see any of that? Statistics? No, black and white, only absolutes. The bell curve analysis of this tells you no matter what, it's there. It happened, it's easy as fuck to see. This is easy to predict. I don't even have to try. I don't even have to look for it. I know it's there. And it'll show up. You do a little investigation, presto changeo, what do you know? Suddenly. And it's amazing to the crowd. But it's like, is it? You should have seen this. This is easy. You just didn't have any information. You never decided to ever even bother thinking about it or doing any kind of work. It's super simple. It's easy as fuck. It takes nothing to know. So why didn't you? Why would you argue? Why would you continue to argue? You didn't do the work. You never investigated. You never thought about it. You only said that I could only be wrong. And I need to always make sure I did this such thing. You did that work. Yeah, I see. I need to spin it. I was training you. I am above. I am above. No, I am the guy. No. And you're, what, famous person that you so idolize? Are they good? No. And you know that. They are human, right? Yes. And all the rest of them? None of them? Not the household names. All the rest of them that made money and eventually got to someone or something, right? Your idols are perfect, right? No. Obviously not. Okay. So you're stupid. You're fanboying, growing, whatever it is, right? Meanwhile, off the charts is what you go with. And you're so smart. So, I was like, nah. This is simple. This should be easy for you to understand. Of course that's a thing. Why would that be so difficult to know? It's not. Exactly. It's not. And that's what my point is. We've had a lot of these. Now the injector, not so much. For what it's worth, that one's new. Rotating valves, oh sure, we've had it, not two plates. That's true. We've never really had most of what it is I've talked about for that, right? But we've had the variable valve duration. We don't have timing, but it's like, kind of you do, depending on how you run those rotating valves. You put them all together, what do you get? Variable valve duration, timing, changing in sizing, enforcing of various pressures, amounts of air, fuels, perfect evaporation, or near perfect, right? Of evaporation of fuels, air, fuel ratios, scavenge effects, operating in the definite highest efficiency parameters for the given materials, for their given pressures, heats, experiencing of friction, and more. You can run lighter, you can run leaner, you can run less. It's easier to even manufacture it for what it's worth because it's casting a little bit of machine work, which you already do because that's polishing effectively. You're getting it right, the right tolerance. All runs beautifully, succinctly, super, super easily within all the correct operating areas for maximum performance and efficiency. Why do you think I talk about my multiple packs of CVTs for the ring and cone systems I usually run? The types of semi-automatics, which will have a little bit lower gear and a little bit higher gear already there, ready for you, engaging only when necessary, right? Right? But it's like you manually, or you automatically, or you ultimately set it up as you want. Okay, sure. Then you have overdrive gears, because that's great for undersquare designs, because of course that's all that's really necessary for an undersquare to perform like an oversquare at higher RPM. If you want an oversquare designed to operate like the given type of torque that you'll receive as an undersquare, then you'll use a step down gear. It goes to a larger gear, and those are types of torque converters they already have, either fluidic or gearing, right? This is my dog. My parents' dog has to be inside of a room and scrapes the door because my dog is with me, Phaser, and he likes to play a little rough. And she's small and old. It's fine for a younger puppy, but like, not her. She can't handle it. It's a thing. So, But that being said, that's really all there necessarily needs to be, right? And it's easy to understand how that works for mechanical engineers and physicists and chemists and more alike. People that did the work. And it's like, well, yeah, sure, there are other words used. I don't give a fuck about your words. Like, what did the Berber thing go Berber like? That's all I need to know. You can be very easily able to understand from that point without even knowing perfectly all the words. You get the point across, that's all that's necessary. It's stupid to imagine I need to have it perfect. Have the math, the lines, the given parameters of exactness that you desire. I give no fucks about you and never will. Because it's not necessary ever. It's irrelevant. The idea that it needs to be said and stated as such for this to understand. Okay, sure, maybe when you're starting out, maybe. Go to those people that'll do that for you. Get the fuck out. I don't give a fuck about you. Are you really curious? Do you want to put in the work? Seriously, are you really someone that wants to put in the work? that understands how it goes into all these other walks. Take racing, for instance. Oh, I can suddenly have a much higher efficiency and higher degree of power achieved like never before. I can cool this much easier. I can very easily, considering what I have here, increase the amount of perceived, because this is what we were talking about before I went into all that for the rant. Torque. Delivery of torque. Delivery of that pressure captured. Okay, and that's not in any way just the levers that he talked about, which it is, for what it's worth. It is, for sure. But it's not just that. Force is just like they always talk about for regular physics, mass and acceleration squared. Pistons are being accelerated. However, not really. It has a detonation in the beginning, right? Which is really combustion at slower speeds, but if you want to achieve a higher degree of RPM, you need to hit detonations, right? Except detonation is actually very, very close to breaking anything. If you want to do it that way. That's a bad way to do it. Don't do it that way. You can't specifically always get the exact same velocities at those RPMs of combustion. It's not perfect. It's not within these 100 meters of seconds. They can massively increase, and sometimes even down to a 5 meter a second can suddenly break something. So never do that. What do? I go, fuck that. I'll get in within the ballpark of, something, and then I will accelerate it, and it'll increase pressure, and I will continuously do this. I don't need to make a detonation. Fuck that. I said that earlier. I don't need to. Why should I? Detonation makes no sense. Why should I do it? Fuck detonations. Fuck all of that. Screw that noise. I don't want to do any of that. That would make no sense. I can dynamically tailor everything I want out of this engine. And it'll be lighter, it'll be stronger, and I can always gain more acceleration, the given mass that's there, acting as more torque, more force applied, right? Which is great. That is great for a longer stroke. It's difficult, though, to do that without knowing things like I do, right? That's often why I tend to have a dynamic overdrive gear. That's a type of CVT, right? It is typically within, I know, the damn dogs. I usually end up going somewhere else because it's so rough. I'm like, I just wanted to get you out of there. You just keep scratching at the door. Alright, so we're outside. Right. But if you can dynamically change, ultimately speaking, those piston speeds, which, by the way, I know people don't think that this is something that means anything, but when you have a bearing and it's attached to a gear, that acts like an impact. But it can deliver its given force over a given period of time, which is dynamic. There's nothing stating in any aspect and or way that you need to have one singular plate at this given distance attached only this particular way for your flywheel. And when you know about how to do that, that means you can apply that given force dynamically, which gives you greater torque, greater force applied at different stages in top dead center and bottom dead center more, as it can ultimately rotate and apply that given force to the flywheel dynamically, which is the planetary gear. And it's like, I don't know how any of that would work. I would need a separate, type of crank or something to, multiples of these, connecting points for the connecting rod and piston. Oh, really? And that's impossible, huh? It's no way, not the thing. No moon landing either. I refuse there's a possibility of moon landing. Meanwhile, I'm looking at India. So how many people decided to say that your lander, your little probe and all that, did not do it, huh? How about you over there, China? You stupid cunts. We did this. Say we did this. They throttle them. And it's like, no. All of a sudden, the engine can't possibly do this. They're no way related. Mechanical engineering, complex highways. And meanwhile, I'm like, yeah, no, so they actually had this back in like 1920, and we can trace it as far back as 1910 because they said that they came up with it and started using it in 1910 in the journal. It's a V8, by the way. Yeah, they strapped their two longer stroke inline fours, to try and balance it with a V angle because they were tired of all the was having on their lower back and their butt. They had a lower compression. You know what they did to get around the lower compression and shit? They forced more air in. That's not even a joke. They were like, I know about this because I had to do this with this type of maritime, boat thingy. And they had this ability to do with this. Next thing you know, dude has a fucking compressor. It's an original super turbo. That's right, it's a super turbo. He has a super turbo. Remember, you probably didn't see it, but I had this issue with intakes not taking into account the fact that the superchargers that you run in your intake manifold are separate. It doesn't make any sense. So it's like, why wouldn't you just cool it, with like a separate stator area for the supercharger and then shove it into the valve as the valve will open? Effectively like a Valvetronic supercharger, right? It's on my YouTube channel already. I added somebody because of a V10 or V8 or something that they were making. And I was like, this annoys me. Like the way that they have and the resonant frequency of these pressure waves as the intake comes open and then it's like, this is pissing me the hell off. Everything about this is wrong. Why don't you just do it this way? And anyways, kindred spirits, I'll tell you, because that's effectively what he wrote in his memoirs and journal about that. And what ends up happening though? He has a V8 that has a super turbo on it. And that's right, the exhaust goes right because they only had the flat V8s at the end. They were using sliding valves the vast majority of the time, rotating sliding valves back then, or valves that were fully somewhere else in two strokes. So it's like, well, fuck that noise. This is rotating anyways. That's my valve. Guess where the exhaust goes, right? Because it's like, well, this valve here, and there's no way I can ever think this leads to this. They didn't have computers or any of these computers or any of this before. Never existed. Fake news. Narrative. Changing. History rewrite. Meanwhile, me. Oh, look at the fucking MAGAs. Look at the Republicans over there. Look at them. Ooh, fucking lame. Fucking retards over there again. Look at them over there. Oh, no, just because America decided to say some dude named Paul rode and his horse and stuff, there's no fucking possible way they would ever do it with engineering or physics or any of the fucking math or anything. It's only perfect every time with them. That's how this works. They're literally great at counting. There's no narrative rewriting this story ever. Do you know how many motherfuckers found out this math that were in India? Before we were like, we discovered it. What? I can't even look at motherfuckers like this is legitimately what you think. Ooh, that's disturbing. It's fucking hilarious after a while. It's also sad, but we're gonna move on. It's like, all right, so this guy does this. He has his intake basically like what I talked about, but a little different. Right, his rotating valves, not the same. There are cylinder rotational valves, right? Okay, like that's legitimately what that is. He domes it out at the top. That's where his new spark plug is, right? But it's a glowy kind of spark plug, right? So it'll get hot a little, but not really. It has a valve. As it rotates, it's covered, it's glowing. And then the moment it then creates as it opens, because it rotates, it then goes boom and creates a spark at top dead center. It'll open only at top dead center, right? Right? This is what his journal, his memoir, really talks about. It's fucking phenomenal, right? And it goes off over to the exhaust. You know where this exhaust goes to? His crank. That's right. This motherfucker has a crank. He's like, I know about cylinders, beeswaxes, and all this other stuff. His crank's hollow. That's right. His crank is actually hollow. He had to connect it somehow. So his crank is hollow. It goes to you guessed it, a big old turbine that rotates itself, and then that with a planetary or something, I forget what he mentioned, but it's like that rotates that cylinder, which then makes the pistons rotate. Now you know why I know about this type of rotary. It's a rotary 12. Remember, Jalen Tyler Lemke's rotary 12, right? That's on my YouTube channel. Comes with like this gear axle, all this other stuff. It's like, where the fuck did you come up with that? It's like, well, I came up with it myself. But it's like, you're right. Someone else must have come up with something. Lo and behold, 1910, this motherfucker came up with a fucking V8 that uses exactly the same thing. This motherfucker basically makes the same fucking thing. It's amazing. I love it. It's almost effectively the same thing. It's not really quite the same, like for what it's worth, right? For what it's worth, because mine's more like it sort of sticks onto the axle. His actually rotates with the cylinder. And I should let people know that. Because like the planetary, that is what did it. So like the blade spinning and all that has a shroud and all that, and has the intake, and so like those would open on the sides towards the front or into and that kind of thing. And it's like, of course, there's heat there. But it's like, yeah, no. Yeah. I don't really give a fuck. Like, that's literally what their attitude was at the time. It's like, I don't give a fuck. So whatever. I'm not even kidding. It was great, though, because it's like, well, actually, that helps, because I start off with it, which is effectively like congealed fat. Is what he has, and then eventually it warms, and no longer is it like that, and it's runny enough, right? And like none of the oil gets in or seeps in. There's some sealing issue. He has to maintain it, blah blah blah, blah stuff like that, right? But it like applies its torque directly to the crank. Something I've been talking about in so many of my designs. It's brilliant. I love it. It's not even a joke. I love his design. The only issue was heat to a degree, right, in the bearings that he has, which didn't last long, but that's materials that they had at the time and what he could source. So he tried to forge his own bearings and eventually mill them down for hardened steel. He talks about like later on, I think in 1912 or some shit, before the big old fucking shit starts happening. And he manages to get there. He gets it done. They work wonderfully. He has all this new fucking great shit, right? He's a V8 that is a super turbo. It literally spins up because he's like, no, I don't need to apply it to the fucking crank. I need more air. Like literally. So it's like there was a governor is what you call it, but him, he's like clutch and gear. It's a clutch and gear. What the fuck is a governor? It's a clutch and gear. He keeps using clutch and gear because it's a clutch and gear. That's what it is. Deal with it. It's clutch and gear. It's a clutch and gear. So it changes. It goes up to this gear and it matches 1-to-1, right? at first, whatever it is, like it applies, and then it'll spin faster and spin faster and spin faster as it engages once it gets to the right RPM, and then it goes, "Behold, my power is not contained yet, bitch." And it spins faster and faster and faster and faster, and engages the supercharger, which now means it's a turbo. That's right, it's a turbo. He has a turbo for his intake. You know what he does to cool off his intake? He has water. That's right, he has a water intake, and then at the exhaust of the where the valves are. Those are his manifolds. They're effectively a bunch of little run-through pipes that are shaped to help with air to go through, and that's effectively all it is. He has an intake that's cooled, and then the exhaust from the supercharger, the compressor area, cooled as well, that goes into, that's right, a previously low compression, now an insanely high compression, cooled head and cylinder that's cooled setup that won't burn. It can't burn. It keeps going. I never have knock. They don't know how he's not having knock. He keeps writing it down. They keep asking about knock. He never has any knock. He doesn't know what knock is. He's never had knock once. They ask him what kind of extra fuel he's got. He says, "Hey, it's just fuel that you give me. It's not tetraethyl. No tetraethyl. He's just using regular gasoline, kerosene, diesel, any of that. No knock." He says, sometimes, diesel is a little rough. But, it worked. He's like, "No, it's all about the amount of air I put in and so on." That's literally what he wrote. Guess what happens? He gets better fuel, fucking ridiculous amounts of horsepower. What does he need it for? Going through thousands of acres of land, pulling large loads of shit. That's literally what it was for. It is that. That's literally what it was all about. And this is literally what he was running the entire time. They had this the entire time. It's not even a joke. Not even a joke. Yeah. They had it the entire time. You know where it went? Gonzo. The guy that he was talking to that was rich and in college. The professor, the guy that's going to lead one way or another, all this stuff, right? Doesn't like him. Doesn't like that he got bested. It gets shoved off to the side. They said nothing about turbos or superchargers really ever except for planes. That's right, only planes got it. Because they need to win the war. The planes, the dogfights. It's a literal, jealousy and spite made it such that we didn't actually progress as fast, along with capitalism as well. Aristocratic bourgeois garbage. Literally not even a joke. It's not even a joke. It's really genuinely what that was. He wrote that down. He made a journal fucking cussing people out, going, you guys are lame, you're losers, you're this or that. All because, and I control the future of it. I am amazing. Just cause, and blah blah. But I am better because I did all this, and I'm the one that controls it. Much like they do with me. Yep. It starts off smaller in the beginning. It gets wider, elongates, flares out at the very end. He's got his, because he needs it to do that, because he has to stick, that's right, you guessed it, a transmission, a crank, a flywheel, all of that to it, right? You have to do it. So it's like, if you want to look at the planetary, the variable valve duration, it's like, all right, so as it moved down, so it rotates down, that initial movement gets slowed down because it has to impart force to a given flywheel, if you wanted to, or gearing, specifically, as it rotates, given the plates that are there and the plates that they're connected to with the flywheel. And of course, as they move, they'll suddenly connect because the spacing and tolerance is such that, oh no, I'm right there. All of a sudden the gears match and I'll add my power in, right? All of that's a thing. They did that no problem back in that day, man. It was not hard for people to understand how this works. Just like I look at these programmers and hackers. Like, no, no, no. That's, well, that's easy. Everybody knows how to do that, right? And it's like, right, everybody. And eventually people no longer know. Just like they lost the art of mechanical engineering and physics and more, they'll lose your art too. That's right, man. They'll lose all of it. You'll be dumbed down. You're like, no, if they're advanced civilization, blah, 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 from this time, a universe before us, they would never have lost any of that you talk about. Nope, they did. Nope, they did. Yeah, no, it's the thing. Easy as fuck. You see it all the time. Why would it not be that way? People that know about any of that never disagreed. Those that didn't, no, I disagree. You have to prove. I don't have to prove nothing to you. You're obviously the idiot that would have lost it. It's like, how does it call to any of this? That's reliability. Solution making. You want NASA involved? Remember I talked about it, I primed you a little bit? You want something to go to the moon, it's going to have a little bit of reliability to it, doesn't it? Not just, you only get the one. Now racing, no, you don't need any reliability. Finish the race to win, huh? Fuck. Same thing with hospitality. It's like, oh, this is great for this person's flavor, how they did it for the brew, and, let's talk, it's coffee, right? It's like, oh, what do you know? Like, that's perfect for them, but this person hates it. Okay, well, right? So what type of flavor do you like? And boom. But it's perfect. But just like I said earlier today, but also previously in my YouTube video, we don't strive for perfect. We strive for really great, if not excellent, if not, as close to. Because we want to be able to still keep making it better. We like that. Now we understand that perfect is currently right now perfect, right? Later on, it will be even better. Or it's perfect for this, and, not for that, right? There's always something more to do for that, or them, or this, or that, or whatever it is, right? Yes, there you go. Now you understand where it's like, oh, so engines, reliability. You know what they did to get around that? They built in redundancies and better materials. Built into the very engine blocks. They could never machine. They could never cast. It's impossible. They had no knowledge. There's no way. They don't know how to refine. They didn't have to constantly work in a mine all the time. There were no child miners. There were no child machinists. There were no child... Are you an individual who's insanely retarded and needs a helmet? You mechanical engineer people? Did you forget? Honestly, I want to know. Did you forget that was going on? Did you forget? You probably forgot, right? Shut up. You forgot, right? A less often talked about, but very much relevant to all of this. They had it. They had the knowledge. They had this understanding. What happened? We infantilize children. Yes, no, we need to get them away from the dangerous and all that. Oh, absolutely. And teach them a little bit more about some of this other stuff. Oh, for sure. What happened? They separated them from adults. They made a haves versus have-nots. Work, home. Right? It's like, no. There's nothing at all wrong about saying, dude, they should not be anywhere near that fucking shit until they know what the hell they're doing. Right? They should not be working for someone. Yeah, neither should you, huh? You ever notice that? You ever notice that? They didn't in any way before. Like, no, everybody has to work because there's no fucking possibility or way for us to survive without that happening. Exactly. Now it happened. No, 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 it's just the man. No, 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 it's the man and the woman. It's only the man and woman. It's the both women, the both men, anyone, any of the adults, just them. Do you see it? Clearly they were able to understand this much earlier. Clearly they were involved much earlier. Clearly they were able to do a lot more with it much earlier than you thought. That is seen time and time again throughout history. You underestimate people all the time. Oh, this is Claro's mind. It's like, ah, jeez, dude. You need to explain exacting details and all the things. Nah. I'm good. Figure it out yourself. You'll be happier if you did. You'll have learned far more because you would have been passionate enough to pursue all of the given options. I give you the basics. That's all you need to know. The basics get you very far if you are creative. And if you're not, suck it up. Do what the creative people that are intelligent, that are going to order you to do something later to do it. Know that that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. That's all that is. And one day maybe you'll have that for yourself, as long as you keep progressing and growing. There's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing beneath. You're not beneath. You're not lower. There's nothing like that going on. You're simply someone that needs to follow someone. Learn at your own pace. And understand that there's definite intelligence there, and there's good reasons and decisions and all that that's there, that's being made, that's being talked about, that's all that you might not understand right now. And truthfully, it's not their job to explain it to you. That's not how that works. You don't have to believe, you don't have to trust, you don't, none of that. I don't ever have to give you power by making it so I have to get everyone on board. I don't. Just like amendments in America make no fucking sense whatsoever. 50 states have to all agree? That's utter bullshit in every way. That makes no sense. Why do you think they're slowly but surely getting people on their side by wearing them down like a glacial, grinding for cannabis? See what I mean? Makes sense, right? Meanwhile, I'll look at you. No, I don't have to get you on my side, and I don't have to prove jack shit to you. Just like those before in America, and I know it had to have happened in other countries. There's no way it didn't. But, just like here in America, that I know of, that this happened, they just did it, and a bunch of government retards like yourself, and bourgeois aristocratic colleges, individuals, which, by the way, yeah, like yourselves, managed to do something that you literally weren't even conceiving of because, of course, you're taught to a certain given type of idea, perspective, creativity type, puzzle piecing, solution making type, view, perspective, feeling, and more. You conform, and that's what that is. Yeah, granted, some of you are just really stupid. It's okay. Some of you are just not picking it up quickly, and that's different. That's also okay. You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of different things that are there, and you don't have to, in any way, be those individuals, because you're not. Those individuals are intentional in their garbage, intentional in their intentional ignorance, intentional all this garbage. Bad. Worthless. Don't do that. Understand that it's fine to be yourself and learn and go at your own pace, or maybe just never really fully grasp all that, and that is fine, because truthfully, you can go and pursue other things that you do understand like that, or you just follow someone else that does. And that makes it better, because everything works better that way. It doesn't make you inherently less or anything at all. Some people also need you to be like that because that helps them be able to get things done. It's a fucking work, a team, kind of thing. It's a job. It's both. It's back and forth. You don't get one without the other. Sometimes that's the thing, right? Okay, moving on. But that's also where I was finished in terms of like how you run a undersquare. Undersquare is really easy for what it's worth when you do it that way. You know what I mean? If you want a valve, the one valve will do it if you know what you're doing. Because if you have a rotating cylinder on the outside and you have one ginormous poppet valve, then that's the whole thing. That's all you need. A rotating cylinder, intake comes in, the valve, the manifold opens up. It comes in, it angles itself. It's making sure that the other side, the exhaust area, is closed. It comes in, and whoosh, swirls around. But you get a bunch of extra air that you wouldn't have had before, or you can always go it from the diagonal side, which is always kind of fun too. You know what I mean? It's like, well, if the intake and exhaust are like right here, then this valve, the pop-up valve, can be angled like this, and as it swirls and vortexes down, of course, and then it closes. Great, that's wonderful. As a seating position, all that. And then as it rotates over to the exhaust, it then opens. There's a little bit of rotation. It still ultimately allows for that exhaust to then be angled off. Now you lose a little bit of efficiency in the exhaust. Technically, it all depends on those geometries and the sizing and the shaping of that port and as it rotates, but ultimately it looks like, right? Yeah, see what I mean? Multiple solutions for one problem. You can do me like an injector. Boom! Screw this. I'm gonna just make it my bitch. I'm that guy. I'm the uber control. I like uber consistent control, precise, accurate, all of it. I think, right? And also, it's pretty much not perfect and all that, right? But it means it takes into account everything I really, reasonably speaking, feel as though it should be a part of that. Yeah, versus like, I got some air. You know what I mean? Like, one valve's good. Make much more easy, less fail. Much less fail stuff. Easy. Super and power more. Easy. Like, literally, that's what my thought process is. It's like, there's less to fail, because there's only the two things. You already had the two things to begin with. One rotates, fine, whatever. Another goes down, fine, whatever. And up, right? It's super, way less likely to fail. Ooh, love it. You know what I mean? Ugh, fucking good. You know what I mean? Versus, like, you have 4 valves for this? Look, you need 2 fucking shafts. Do you have gears attached to the shaft? I don't know, man. Oh, shit. Whoopsie. Something failed again. No. It's just, it's a engineering thing. Stuff can fail. Yeah. Meanwhile, me, also. Bump stop make go up. On, part at front where serpentine is. That equal valve go down, rocker arm like. Oh, at bottom dead center. It pulled down, yeah. With fluid, kind of situation. Plunger go down, plunger go back up. That kind of thing. Can be inside cylinder, much more compact. Yeah, okay, sure, that's true. That would work. I mean, I see no problem with that. Truthfully, that would work. It rotate of an axle that go to rotatey part for intake and exhaust. I see. That would work too. It also makes slidey happen. What? Oh yes, no. Yes. For more where the port is, where it's connected, it's like open or close. Various amounts for at different RPM. Full open, full close. No. You cannot because it's idle. So it's like idle, but then it's open this length. This is full length duration. Every time, no matter what, because that's easy. But like sometimes you want it to be open earlier, right? And so then slightly open, but also that slightly opens up valve a little. That's axle stuff. Axle easy. I can easily make axle. Axle also houses inside cylinder with valve go, burr with the juicy woosies, non-Newtonian stuff. That would work. Oh God, you bastard! He's doing it for every cylinder. Sometimes I do hate you a little though. Are you sure? Are you sure? I mean, like that's super simple. Like, why didn't you just like it doesn't seem that hard. I'm just saying. Just fucking ask. Just get a mechanical engineering degree. Oh wait, that person that's mean, which they totally have one, right? Yeah, I have a mechanical engineering degree. I'm definite. They just comment that on one of my videos, and I'm like, oh yeah, totally. Anybody could say anything. Meanwhile, me, yeah, I didn't have that, and I just came up with this, and it was easy. I don't see what the problem is. Why don't you just like learn how to be creative and think about things? Like Einstein talks about it all the time, but your imagination is a better tool than any goddamn fucking anything else. That degree is almost worthless if you don't have it. Yeah, so why don't you just get that? Fucking just get imagination. I have aphantasia, like types of it. Like for real. Like just get better at imagining things. Just do that. Fuck you too. Just I don't know. Just be better than you are, I guess, or something. Why? Because I hate people like that. But it shouldn't be hard. Like honestly speaking, it really isn't something that you can't ultimately figure out by thinking about it a little bit. Which then turns it into people don't think. People aren't thinking in any kind of real aspect or way. And that becomes dangerous. Why do you think I get so angry? It's like, no, you should think a lot more. You should do some more thinking. Maybe you should think a little bit more before you do that. Can you Darwin yourself somehow? I made it a little bit easier than it should be to live to a point where they can become that kind of a thing. You know what I mean? It's a little. You're not supposed to say that. You said all the things that we were thinking, huh? Just a little, right? Because after a point, it's like, how the fuck did you make it to be this old? How the fuck did you do that? You have a degree? It just goes to show you can plod along and eventually get there. You know what I mean? So, but that's super simple. You can easily do that, right? It's like I don't know how to make a fucking valve duration crank thing. I've talked about it multiple times. What's so hard about it? Yeah, that's a lot of machining that I have to change what I do. Right. But it was going to be the average and everybody would have just started that way. But then, eh. Why don't you just, like, admit that you found something better that you'd rather do now versus something else? There's nothing grand or great about sticking with a bad idea in design. You know what's grand and great? Changing it when you notice that there's something better. And you should just do that instead. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, sure, there's more complexity to some of this, but it's like, yeah, no, but also you have more control. You also have better dynamics throughout the RPM as it operates as efficiently as it can. Right? It's like I have a variable intake a variable runner, that is, manifold size, sizing of the hose, and all the rest. Even for exhaust, it can be very much the same. Now, there's caveats, of course. There's a little bit of leakage, I'm sure. There's no way there wouldn't be, right? Valve vents never existed. Nope, they don't happen to exist at all, somehow. Not even a thing. I don't know where that came from. Who are you? Explain that to me. Explain it now. You don't have my degree. You explain everything about valve vents right now. Valve cover vents don't even exist. Get the fuck out of here. I can't believe that you said it was valve vents instead of valve cover vents. I don't know. Nobody would understand it. It's clear as mud. Meanwhile, you're not a fun person around others, are you? Do people like to, figure out how best to get rid of you in their vicinity and just appease you? No. Ooh, never happened, right? It's never been a thing. You've never noticed any of that? That might explain why. But that's the point. It's like there are many ways to make an engine run very, very well. In fact, you can do. Remember, I talked about the whole ram or push rod, right, for the valve and the hollow, crank arm or the double eyes or whatever, right? Or not crank arm, connecting rods, right? I talked about. Yeah, a little flaw, a little mistake, whatever. I corrected it. But it's like, yeah, it's hollow. It's like, yeah, but how does that work? Are you sure you can't imagine how that would work? No, sir, please. Meanwhile, I'm like,
Hey,
intake can still happen with that.
your dryer's ready.
All right, give me a second. There's like, yeah, no. There's nothing that states in any aspect or way that you can't get your valves to be a part of your connecting rod, which I actually have several different uploads about that exact thing. I call it the Limke cycle 2 because it's thrust. It comes in from the crankshaft that's compressed by a crank supercharger or a regular intake, or if you want to be really cool about it, a double where the exhaust goes down into the crank. It's cooled by fresh oil in between that housing with gears and bearings, along with the, of course, where did my other fucking... Oh, did I bolt? I put both of them in there? No, I have the one. Okay. Well, that's kind of weird. Where'd the other one go? Where the fuck did that go? What the fuck? Did it fall or something? What the fuck is this? A blanket has gone and disappeared. Anyways, it was right here. I remember putting it right there. That's true. Anyways, point is, then you have that effectively have the exhaust, rotate housing inside. So those are fans, right? And those are stators that can be there, which are gear types, right? It's like there's nothing that says, wait, what? You can't have gears. You can't have gears be stators. That's impossible. It would never work. I reject your reality and substitute my own. I don't know, man. It seems like that's a thing that could possibly work. No. I just like everything. And it's like, no, obviously that could work, clearly. Now, granted, they're not going to be perfectly shaped circular, kinds of things, but it doesn't change that they are still stators, and they still ultimately make sure that they're aligned in multiple places. That's perfect. That's exactly what you're looking for. All right? And it's like, wow, I came up with that when I was homeless my second time. Just recording. I put it up on my Gray Life, actually, and then I deleted those videos a long time ago. I still have them, though. Off the channel, that is. I still have those videos, though. But I have basically every recording I have ever had, still, truthfully. Like, all my beginning ones, Even when I was homeless. Seriously, I do. I always get other ones. But it doesn't really matter because it's like, all right, so here's an easy way to kind of grasp and understand where that comes from. It's like, right, well, then that'll rotate it, right? And it's like, not really. All right, that can, for sure, absolutely. As a turbo, right? Absolutely. It's fresh oil. That's colder oil, right? You can cool your oil. And it's like, right, yeah, except for the oil also gets pre-chilled from colder incoming engine coolant. Which I didn't explain, but why wouldn't you do that? It's about to get heated up. And then I have, the fact that I need engine, coolant to run somewhere. So it's like, well, that makes sense. You can input it there. And it's like, well, there's something I can do even better, which is called, and I love this one. You're going to hate me for this one, but like, okay, now I understand why the white vinegar doesn't work for this. Because apparently there's baking soda and OxyClean. Windex it is then. Windex? Yeah. It has ammonia. Yeah, it's already got baking soda, so I need to put more in there. The OxyClean? Yeah. Stupid. It is, though. It is ammonia. Meanwhile, chemistries, love this one trick. Put isopropyl in like everything you do if you want to get rid of like almost all. Like it's literally it's like just put isopropyl alcohol in like everything. Yeah. Because it really does. It really does actually, like with distilled water isopropyl is like the fucking jam to get rid of like practically everything that can really kind of be attracted or attached to your clothes, right? So it's like, oh, shitty fucking really? Yeah, it's a thing. Like most organic compounds and synthetic, a good amount of them, can be attracted to a distilled isopropyl. So that's one of the better parts about it. But a lot of people are kind of weird about that problem. Yeah, yeah. Oh, right. We're talking about the turbo thingy. Right. Turbo. Right, so it's a turbo, but it's a supercharger. So it's like it runs off of the crank and it has a certain stuff up here, right? And it's like, and then it'll engage the turbo. That exhaust will go first towards the bottom. That's why the bottomers are there, and then it goes from the bottomers to like a two-stroke basically kind of system as it'll expand, right, to a degree, right? But it's like no, and then it expands up and then it goes, right, captures that right into the turbo sort of thing. Which is great. You're gonna want that. I wanted a deep wash, not a heavy duty. Jeez, I know. All right, extra rinse. 120 it says. All right. So where's my extra fucking blanket? And where's my saber soap? Oh, it's over there. I didn't put it over there. Why is it over there? This is stupid. Thanks, Mom. Anyways, it's like, all right, why'd you come up with that? Well, the main reason why is I hate turbines. They're very inefficient. So I eventually ended up with a type of Jules Thomson, small to medium to large, with a, internal, as you see like a Jules Thomson, it goes from small, medium, large, there's tubes. You put some stators there. Put a parabolic spike where that is, where it has to make the change and turn over, right? And then put a little bit of curvature. But like that's axle, that's like, no way, there's that bearing, there's a bearing, it's got the gear thingy with jigs. To the central, and then it goes to the, and then when it goes to the tip, and then there's a vacuum kind of, because there's a stator, and then it separates, and then there's a lower pressure, a vacuum, almost as it, kind of skips by, and then draws like a vacuum. They have these things called like, they look like little mushroom kind of things. But anyways, point is, I got it from Tech Ingredients. And it's effectively a type of vacuum pump that they have. It's like it has these little overhangs that are like little mushrooms, right? And then it takes that air and it draws more air out. So I was like, oh, well, the wingtips can do that. And have the right little thing and the right little curve. It'll just do the same thing, right? Anyways, there's like an internal, and it goes like, oh, right. Well, I mean, the gears that you talk about, right? Mm-hmm. And then out, and then the middle, right? That's a metal tube. That's an axle, right? And it goes through hollow, like, blades. Uh-huh. And then it goes, and it fires in at the front, right? Yeah. Okay. And then as it spin and wins, there's a counter rotation to the internal, but then then there's a big boy, big blades. You know, the Jules Thompson cycle. That does same thing as higher pressures, then go and they go, now I'll make that spin starting. You know, and then that starts spinning, counter to that. And then it'll draw more air as it goes from the turning part. You know, it has to go do like a little 180, but then it, of course, it has to spin and do stuff, right? Yeah. And it's like, guess what happens? Guess what happened, guys? Guys, there's a low pressure there, and it wants to go there because it blows air from that area into the blades. And so then as it travels, it's starting to spin, and then it spins, and it makes more vacuum, and then more vacuum because stuff going the other way, because Tesla valve effectively kind of stuff, you know. And it's like, where did you describe this one? Several times. I even have one named Jules Thompson turbine or something. It's like, you know, but it started off with a internal type of, you know, smaller axle kind of turbine that I needed to figure out how to because I wanted to do it such that it had heat exchanged. See, like a lot of the heat from a turbine isn't captured into anything, you know, workable energy, right? So I was like, oh, I'll cool it. I'll be running it even hotter, but it'll be, you know, cooled from the axle, and it'll go out towards the tips of the wing blades, or from the axle, and then towards the shroud, right? And it's like, right. So it's like active cooling. It's a pump, right? But it's like, yeah. Except it turns into, you guessed it, a lower pressure. As it spins, it goes faster. And then it vaporizes into steam, and then that'll spin another one. And then I went, yeah, that's a bad design. I wonder I got rid of that. Like literally, it's like, this is just a bad design all around. That's a stupid way to go about doing that. That's dumb. They had to start somewhere. You know what I mean? Like, if you want to start the design somewhere, like, you gotta start somewhere. So, like, the premise is to take the heat. And, of course, that means they can change the geometry and pitch and blade angle. And then, of course, that's a lubricant. If you happen to decide to use a lubricant, like a non-Newtonian hydraulic fluid, that is fine with vaporizing at different heats. Which means instead of needing CFCs or, you know, refrigerants, well, I don't. It's going to change its heat, it's going to change its pressure, it's going to change its velocity, right? So it's like, oh yeah, no, I can use that to lubricate the bearings and everything. And it's like, yeah, no, but it's shit. It's inefficient. I have to vacuum this, I have to do that, get all the way over there, and then, of course, it cools and drains down, and that's its own version of like a thermosiphon pump, you know, from lower to higher, and then it drains back down. But it started it. I started while I was homeless. An mission, of all things. Yeah. Yeah, it's basically the only homeless shelter in the area. It's a shelter, but it's a mission. That's right. Like the religion kind. So that's what I did all day. I was trying to think of how to make fusion viable. And so it's like, well, if you think about plasma being fluidic, and you think about it as pressures, and you think about it with magnets and some copper coils and electromagnets that are embedded into the blades, then you're able to, as it spins, capture its energy, but also force it to be more compressed, travel faster, be more ordered, be pumped, like a linear accelerator that fires into itself like a particle accelerator with high luminosity, and then goes boom with compressy-wessy effects of the vibrational, superposition entangle-ish, and then really, really fast velocities, and then goes biggity bang bang boom boom bada boom boom boom. And it works. It works every time. We already have particle acceleration fusion stuff. Give me a second. Parent stuff. Anyways, parent stuff. But it's like, all right, so if I want to do that, then it's like essentially really easy to curve them with blades that are already there. Because obviously there's a lower pressure here, there's a higher pressure there, there's more of an ability to create multiple little tiny, and a larger type of magnetic field that can angle, be phased, make lensing effects, and more, and then ultimately place in lenses, mirrors, and coherent light that's already being expressed by the plasma, and increase its heat and ultimately vibratory kinds of styles of excitation, which means I can now start to entangle and order and align and compress like a baryonic, and then which means it's in a technicality superposition temporarily, and then pops out as a, well, I'm technically very close to each other. Like I'm super compressed. Holy fuck. Boom. And I was traveling really fast, so that kinetic has to go somewhere. So I tunnel together. And I come out as fused material. And what do you know? That's not cold fusion. It's not very cold at all. It's just a little bit more ordered. You say cold is ordered. No. Ordered is ordered. Cold can make ordered. It doesn't mean ordered. Just like heat equals pressure to some doesn't mean pressure. Pressure is pressure. Heat is not always pressure. See what I mean? You gotta understand that part. They're slick. But that's why I did it that way. It was like, oh yeah, no, well, this is totally a way to do that. I can actually cool it. I can even improve its condensing styles of properties at the right times and points. I can get back a large amount of the energy I lost. And certain fluids increase the degree and likelihood of ferro, electro, and other types of magnetic activities I'm looking to achieve. I eventually released something online, and it's like, well, it's totally feasible. It's absolutely a way to make fusion, real fusion. But I found out that it was like, this is stupid, and its Q value is like, well, it's higher than the input. It's stupid. It's a really, heat and pressure has to come from somewhere. You know what I mean? Like, it's bad. Like, why not just make it better than what that is? Why not, if you already know that you can baryonic it, you already know that you can condense it in a way that makes it seem like there's no luminosity really except for one line, then why wouldn't you just do that? If you already know how to entangle, you already know the superposition to a degree, why don't you just do that? Like, that's a lot less energy than fucking, like, trying to make that happen, especially when you don't need to order it in such a way that it makes it actually so cold that it does that. Which is why I say it's technicality superposition. It's technicality baryonic. It's technicality entangled. It's a faux. I don't need to do it the same way, and that's why it's a Lemke principle in law. Information acts as if it is, and that's why it's quantum information. That is a Lemke law. Quantum information, that's a Lemke principle. A Lemke. It's Lemke, me, named after my last name. That's why. A lot of them are Lemke fields, Lemke quantum information, Lemke actions, so on, right? That's why I named them after myself, right? And who doesn't really? So I moved on, and it was like, well, you want to try and make that undersquare cylinder, right, perform as adequately as possible. You don't want to have a valve, just put a fucking cylinder together, right? Just put a fucking cylinder together. Why not just do that? Just put a fucking cylinder together. What are you talking? What? It's like, yeah, no, just put a cylinder together. Okay. Yeah, just put a cylinder together. That rod, right? It doesn't need to be a rod. What if it just intake because it rotated on the hollow arm. It's connecting to it. And as it's solid, but I only need it to be exactly what I need it to be, where I need it to be. Right. And as it's going from a centrifugal in some aspect, because it's curving in, because that's intake, to a centripetal force, as it's going outwards from its center point, then you end up understanding, it's like, oh, right. The path of least resistance is in the chamber, with that absolutely being something that can also input all of the fuel you want. As it rotates, it's like, oh, what do you know? There's a bunch of fuel. Oh, you know, it comes in, it's mixing with it, compressed, boom. It's like, where does the exhaust go? Where does the exhaust go? Where the fuck you want, man? Which version you want? Hmm? Do you want it at the top? Do you want it at the bottom? Which one? Which one do you want? Do you want it in the arm? What? Yeah, no, seriously. What version do you want? There are multiple solutions to that problem. Which one works best for you and your applications? I can have it shove off into another cylinder. I can have it shove off into the outside. I can have it shove off into the arm. I can have it shove off into the crank. I can have it shove off anywhere. Nothing says I have to have it always like that, right? Well, yeah. Right. And so that's the problem I have with creativity in mechanical engineers. It's not very fucking present. There are many solutions to one problem, and you never know which one might be the right one for your given application. Like, this type of way of doing it? Oh, absolutely, it works perfectly. But this one, that won't work for us. Like, okay. Well, then do that then. Just do that one. Like, you have the machining, you have all that. No, but it is not easy because money or something. Oh, yes, the money. Go do capitalism. Great capitalisms. Super. How about this one? You literally have multiple ways of doing this. It's a block. It's a cylinder. It's machined and honed to a given type of thing. You have a bottom or a top. It doesn't matter which side it is, truthfully speaking, because there's bolt holes and you can always put another bolt hole in. Anybody ever think about it? But it's just a material that got machined and honed to a certain tolerance and specification. That's literally all an engine is. If you know about that, then it's like there's nothing stopping you from doing any type of design you want. It's a blank clay canvas. That's it. They can do it with anything. You can practically do anything with it. All right? So that's it. It's just a block. What do you want the block to look like? How do you need it to be to perform for your given application? That's it. So like Undersquare is really simple, often, but not really. Okay, it all depends on what you want to do. I like to make thrust. I don't do thrust that way anymore because it like definitely doesn't work as well as I wanted it to. But I have that design on my channel already. It still works wonderfully well. It's still cooled adequately. Nothing combusts in the chamber. Pressures are fine. Everything's good. I just don't like its complication. It's a fairly complicated thing, and honestly, I have to take everything apart to get at anything. It's great in terms of compactness, in terms of physics, in terms of all of that. But it sucks in terms of like, man, I have to work on this thing. I have to literally unbolt everything. If I want to fucking work on this, this is a kind of a nightmare, honestly. Yeah, and so it's like, nah. And that's where eventually it turned into, what do you know? My fuel cell. My QVP toroidal fuel cell design that I've talked about multiple times on my channel. It's effectively the same as a counter-rotating kind of turbine, but then it's a toroidal. It's not a piston really, but then it kind of looks like a piston. It acts like a piston. It compresses, it intakes from the center, and it goes outwards, and of course it creates torque. There's a flywheel. The fuel cells, depending on the gaps, and then the work energy to create ultimately given types of fields that attract or repulse at the right times are all there. It's a fuel cell. It's like that's my design, mine. Just me. No one, and I mean this, has ever come up with it. I can't find anything about this, even in patents, even in people's journals. I can't find it. It's just me that's ever been the one to design something like that. You want to know why that happens? Because it takes effort and energy to learn how to be creative, and you still have to be insanely intelligent. You can't be like any of them that are very unintelligent, but know a given type of information, and as a result, they're smart about that. Intelligence and smart, one without the other. Intelligent, and I'm smart too, which is great, does not mean smart. And smart really does not mean intelligent. You don't get smart the same way. You know what I mean? It's like heat doesn't mean pressure. Smart doesn't mean intelligent. Intelligent means intelligent. Pressure means pressure. Order means order. Smart does not equal those things. See what I mean? It's like, no, you can learn how to be creative by really hard work. Not really. Not from what I've ever seen. Some people are born with that and they can hone that talent and they can definitely do it. And some people are able to go and become more creative, but it doesn't mean that they'll suddenly hit on the same thing. It takes a lot of work and effort to figure out how to be creative and to do it well like I do. Then no. It's very rarefied air that tends to happen the moment you do that. And that's something that people often find unfair. And I'm like, yeah, well, I have a bunch of ways of changing our genetics and our brain structures and more on my YouTube channel already. And from what I can tell, you don't even do the work required to be smart. So go do that work instead. Who's gonna do that? Like, you can make someone's brain that fucking way, but it doesn't suddenly make them that. You know what I mean? You still have to have information. You still have to do it. You still have to, hone the skill. You still have to do all that. You don't get there without doing that. So, Undersquare is usually a consistent, well, what type of way do you want to do it? Seriously, what type of way? There's multiple different ways to do it. I've even heard of people having rotating valves on the sides of the cylinder to be able to improve outright amounts of air intake and exhaust, right? Or two-stroke it, where the given type of piston skirt, you know, opens it up as a valve. They'll still have a valve at the top, right? But that means they have intake and exhaust types that are different and change where they'll be at different RPM. And that one's not recent. That one's really old. That one's extraordinarily old. If you don't know, that one's like fucking, I think, late 1700s, early 1800s. I'm not kidding. Like, that one's really pretty funny to watch because it was like, do you know decomposition in electricity of like steam makes boomity boom? Not even a joke. Like booms. Huh? And it's like there's literature talking about how people that experimented with electricity and steam would get more out of it if they happened to do that. Guess what happens? They remove the heat to decompose. And instead, they decompose it using a little bit of heat or using electricity. They stored it, and then they would run steam engines that way. That's right. Seriously, it's not even a joke. The very, very, very beginning early separation of our gases in water happened that way. More or less, try and effectively, in this instance, be able to power engines at a higher altitude for certain types of farms because they didn't like the black smoke it was producing, the soot, and they needed higher torque. So they'd force in steam. They would then force in oxygen together, and then they would fire in hydrogen with a plunger system. It's not even a joke. It was a plunger system. It was like, need a cylinder, and it's not a joke. They did that. You want to know where that happened? That happened all the way in Africa. That is in Africa one. And it's like, where's the fuck hell? And it's like, it's North Africa for what it's worth. And then, depending on, truthfully, because around that time, like, we're talking about where things were considered in terms of continent and what lines were drawn on maps at the time. So it's like, you know. So, point is, yeah, that's a thing. All right, but people don't know anything about it. Really, they don't. They like literally nobody really knows. Like, unless you're really good at historical, like sourcing, because you need to know about that. You wouldn't even know about it. Now, the only reason why I talk about it is because there was a big hullabaloo about when it was started, and a whole ripple across the historical blah blah blah, and blah, 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 blah. And they were all pissed off for a while, and I laughed my ass off watching them fucking debate when it is that apparently even the word monkey came in for these so-called scholars, not racist, all this, could have ever came up with such a thing. That's right. They debated heavily the validity of this because of more or less just racism. They had working, usable engines like that for a long time. Now, we're not talking, okay, anything that we know of like these days, right? But they did work by turning something and making something move. And it outperformed the animals they used, right? Back to the farmer stuff again, right? And guess what? It gave them water. It was hard to carry water up that distance. Well, if I'm going to have to do it anyways, I might as well make it do something. See? They got it. That's what that was. So, turns out, they did this process constantly. And eventually, certain individuals, my ass, we know damn well who that was. And there's a lot of them that were debating that were German, Britons, French, and Italians that didn't appear to like what it is that they were hearing. And I was like, I wonder why, right? Shockingly, it still exists. But I do want to move on because it's like they were undersquared, but they were massive. They were very different types of designs. They were effectively machined, um, stuck together brass, iron, shit like that, that didn't really even have actual lubrication. Like, They use the water as the lubricant, and the pressure that it generated as that steam to create what is now considered a gas fluid hybrid bearing, which is amazing because now like that's a really high performance bearing that's extraordinarily slick, right? They were using that back then. Like it's only like, no, these are brand new bearings. These are brand new bearings, guys. No one's ever created, and it's like no, they've had this since apparently the late 1700s and early 1800s. That's literally what that is, and it's like no, no, and I'm like yeah. Now you can see why. Like a lot of people get butthurt feelings. I don't know anything about this, and it's like, hey, can I put my hand up here? Turns out you're wrong, and they were doing this back then. Meanwhile, fuel cells are a really, really, really new invention. They don't really exist. You know, like until you get to like the 90s, they don't really exist. We don't really ever use them. We use air batteries to a degree for a while, right? But we have no use for a fuel cell type of idea, right? And so, like, the reason why nobody ever thought to put them together, because first off, they're expensive. And I don't want them to break or any of that. And it's like now we have great new materials that do this without being nearly as expensive. They are absolutely able to handle those pressures and those speeds and the rotation velocity, all of it. That's how that ended up becoming something I used, right? That's why it's brand new. Now, Undersquare is what they were using. They had an insanely high performance ratio for what they were doing because effectively they were shoving in steam and hot air like a steam engine, right? That is genuinely it's the combusted gases they were effectively using along with the steam coming in, and they were using essentially what a Stirling and I think what is his name, Venturi and Bernoulli, both the Italians. So like as it came in, it would suck in air, right? Like that lower pressure stuff. And so they figured out how to force in more air to get more power and pressure, right? But then they would also during that be forcing in this oxygen, right? Well, they didn't know it was highly reactive when it got hot until later, because inevitably it blew up. If you want to know the sad truth and story of that, it blew up. Yeah, they literally blew up an engine, and that was like pretty much the only I think besides like maybe two more, and each one of them eventually blew up too because they kept pushing pressures. They kept trying to get it hotter with oxygen. The vessels would eventually decay and degrade because they would become oxidized and weaken over time. And so the sad truth of it is while yes, they were able to do this, they didn't know about stuff like that. And so eventually it broke. They didn't know to maintain. They didn't have the money. They're using this as like a profitable way of running what they were doing because otherwise it wasn't profitable. And it's all about the journals that they had. They had working examples. They had people that came, multiple other people that are legitimate people that eyewitnessed this and saying about it. And, you know, there's a few stories in newspapers and articles about the monkeys that learned to do something. And it's like, God, fucking hell, the racist levels of shit you see. Gosh. Fuck. Holy shit. These news articles are rough, bro. It's bad. But it's the truth. The truth is they had that. They were really doing that. And it's like, I'm not trying to have you going. These are really there. But man, do they take a while to search for it because it's not like, oh, I can just easily Google this. It's not like, man, seeing the praises of this thing from back then. And this is lesser known fact of something of our history, which is steeped in mired in a bunch of jealous, rich white people that didn't want it to ever do well or get anywhere. It's not even a joke. Around that time, America was fighting Britain was fighting. Lots of people were fighting. They did not like this. That's a genuine, true statement, unfortunately, about what was going on around that time. And that's kind of why this ended up happening to be sort of forgotten about. Even though the evidence is there and you can find it, and people do know about it, you'll find a lot of people that'll never know, I would have known, blah, 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 and so on. And it's rough, right? But it's an undersquare that effectively used a technique that are considered now high performance techniques. They have rotating valves, ring valves, that open up and allow for air to come in during intake. They're closed on the exhaust, right? Like, they inject more using basic vacuum, Venturi and Bernoulli's. Carburetors didn't come out for a long time. They had carburetors. They had carburetors. They had injectable carburetors. Because if you didn't know, they created something that rotated, and the bump stops that they eventually used on these. No, we came up with the first dogfighting airplanes that went boop, 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 that, right? Guess what? They had that on the intakes. They would squeeze a little rubber thing diaphragm. I don't remember exactly what that. I think it was like a rubber wood thing. It doesn't matter. Point is, it squeezed it, and what do you know? Pushed in more. That's what it did. They had injectors already. They already had plungers. That's effectively what it was. It's literally it's a rod attached to this fucking gap, and then there's like a little rubber bit that they just squeeze down, and that's the hydrogen. That's right. And they're like, we're timing, and it didn't seem to end this, that, or whatever. And it's like, then they eventually, it's like a little bit delayed, a little bit this, a little bit, and it's like, boom, oh, whoosh. They write all about it. Doesn't get anywhere, right? There's a small little excerpt in a newspaper. Oh, they got more out of it. You know what I mean? That's what they did, right? They did that. And that was kind of the end of it. If you look at it, eventually you'll see that it exploded. Their journals say that they exploded. Things corroded. They were unable to keep it sustained. It went unnoticed, disappeared, became obscured in the annals of history. Black people couldn't do this. They had no technology like that. There's nothing conspiratorial about jealous people that have large amounts and mountains of money and fame to be had or to keep. It doesn't exist, right? No, obviously it does. We know about it. People do it all the time. Sorry, folks, but the fact is, that's right. They had two-stroke technology that we use as high-performance two-stroke. That's not even a joke. It's a two-stroke. It was always a two-stroke. It only used it for the intake. Exhaust was always the same. Exhaust was just only that. It exhausted only when it got at certain points, and the intake is only ever going to be open, right? Phaser, they're coming back. It's okay. Jeez. But that's the point I'm trying to make. That's literally the point. It's like, no. The exhaust is two-stroke. Like, that's it, right? And the exhaust is also four-stroke, because the exhaust at the top is also four-stroke. It's timed. But the two-stroke side, or the carving away of the steam, the vents, the valves, right? That's only handled by the piston head. Although it's not really technically a piston head, you're gonna have to get into that. I like to think of it more as a piston engine, but it wasn't really technically a piston engine, so you'll have to get into that. And that's debate stuff. I don't care. Point is, I just want you to understand its, concept ultimately and how it worked, right? Because that's effectively what it was doing. Literally, it's like, oh, I now need to have a bearing. And so this fluid and gas would combine in a pressurized area as it would escape, and then effectively run through this and then create a bearing, a fluid gas bearing. keep itself steady, right? And that would also drive intake in all of this. And it produced a okay little one. Jeez. All right. Edgar Allan Poe up in this bitch. So just go over here. I never understood why I wouldn't just go outside, just not care. It's so much guilt and shame. Yeah, no, that's because you should, because you didn't deserve it. That's true. That's a normal response. Anyways, moving on. We'll talk about how, like, that's effectively what the engine really was, right? That's literally what it was and what it is and how it worked. They had high performance application. It's effectively a 4-2-stroke, a 2-stroke, 4-stroke combo, right? And it outperformed basically every engine on the planet at the time. I'm not kidding. Its torque, the gearing it ran at, meant that it had higher horsepower and torque than anything at the time. We were still firing muskets in America. We're like, the mini ball is a great achievement, guys. Clap, 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 pat on back. You know, fucking. These farmers over here are like, we basically have the equivalent of the beginning of like rocket jet engine stuff. It's like, no, we needed more power, so we separated gases from this liquid. We will now burn this into this, and which will make more Bernie burn, as that's what it did. As it moved, it also fanned the flames. It would funnel in more air to the wood they were burning. Like literally, all of it was effectively all the coolest high performance stuff that we have now. And they had it before the 1800s were a thing. And we're like, no, tell us more about how war advances our technology. I'm like, apparently not as fast as farmers. Maybe don't you just have an incentive to eat for once? Ooh, suddenly, you know, you'll rapidly accelerate on that one, yeah. I haven't eaten in 3 days. Grrr. Grrr. You'll figure it out real quick, trust me. You want water? Ooh, you'll figure out how to make water. You'll figure it the fuck out, yeah. You'll do it. But for what it's worth, it's the incentivization of figuring out how to better something and get more out of something, rather than we need to kill someone. Which, by the way, we need to kill someone more efficiently and better. Get more out of that. That's how the innovations of war are ultimately all figured out. Literally. So, it's not war per se itself. It never has been. It's the incentive of something. The positive pleasure response in the neural network that gets people to do it. There's no negative that manages to do it. It's a thing, you know? But that's the undersquare stuff. Undersquare is effectively that. Oversquare is essentially a different type of thing entirely. Like, oversquares suck. Like, to be fair, like, there's literally genuinely no way of getting around an oversquare issue of RPM. Right? I can't push materials past a certain point. I can't push friction coefficients past a certain point. There's nothing you can really reasonably do with an oversquare design past a point. There's a literal limitation. Unless we can get into quantum physics, there's nothing you can do. That's just what an oversquare has for a problem. Undersquares have plenty of solutions to make them faster, more torque, and all the rest. You know, but this just out there, you know, throwing it out there, has become the best part for me. Okay. There's a really good argument to be made for a very specific application used for any given square. Under or over or perfect, right? There's always an argument. You always have to remember that. Okay, that's how that works. Which means, no, yeah, sure, that's a way to get around some of these issues, but it doesn't mean that it's the right call for your given application, right? And the pose pistons to get effectively double the length of stroke from a given over square has existed for a really long time. But there's always a limitation for the size of your piston head. There's always a limitation for any of it. So it's all up to individuals and how they want to run it. All right, over and out. Bye.